So I get between these pews and I'm like, Lord, I know clearly that you nudged me to go talk to this girl, get to know her. And I'm like, what do I do? And I was like, I may never see her again. So in the middle of singing, congregational singing, I walk up in front, the pew in front of them. I turn around, and I had this, back then it was a spiral top notebook. And I opened it, I handed it to her, and I was like, could I have your number? I would love to get to know you better. And she's like, and Miss Allison sitting on the other side of her. I couldn't believe I was doing it. She couldn't believe I was doing this. And I was like, I'm not going to be here tonight, and you're not going to be here the rest of the week. I'd like to get to know you. So she wrote down her number, and I still have that pad of paper. It is in my desk drawer at the church. She handed it back and held on to it. And she said, you better fast and pray before you call this number. Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Chris Hewett, and I'm here with my beautiful bride today, Miss Chloe, and this is the Hewett Family Podcast. And this one is by request. Obviously, everybody would rather see her than me, and we are going to be telling a little bit about our courtship, things that we grew on, and our testimony, and then also we want to give some biblical courtship advice and how we went about establishing a biblical courtship. So stay tuned for that. If you would, go ahead and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or if you're watching or listening via the podcast audio, go ahead and follow us, whichever outlet you're listening to, and we want to get the word out about what we're doing here, trying to help people. All right. So we're going to tell some of the fun stuff. Miss Chloe and I came from different backgrounds. I grew up in a pastor's home. She grew up in a home that, unfortunately, there was divorce in the home, and there's no blame or nothing for anybody of that. But we come from different backgrounds. She didn't grow up necessarily in church every Sunday like that, but I grew up in church every Sunday. But we both needed to be saved. We both needed to be redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, and so we coming from different backgrounds on that in that measure. But I'm gonna tell a little bit of my story, and then she'll tell you. I didn't really know the word courtship. That was an old word. I think the only time I really understood what courtship was or heard the word courtship is when we would watch the movie Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and there's the song on there, "Going Courting." I think that was it. But I grew up and we just dated, and we didn't have a lot of boundaries in that. I'm thankful for my parents. They took me to church. They raised me around the gospel, but we did not have a lot of boundaries as far as courtship or dating went. And as I got into my teens, obviously that started causing me turmoil in my life. It caused me struggles. I'm not in any way coming at this like I've done everything right, and I regret a lot of things in my life. And but as I got into my early 20s, I was talking to a young lady in my early 20s after I'd surrendered my life to God, submitted my life to God, and she started talking about having boundaries here and having boundaries here. And I also met about the same time, a little after that, Brother Jody Cole. And I thought that girl was crazy. I was like, what in the world? And then Brother Jody Cole and I met, and Brother Jody starts going to the Bible, and I'm, whoa, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. And so he starts teaching me about biblical courtship, and started putting boundaries in my life. And then she and I met, 2011? I know you are not the one to ask about dates. But we met in June of 2011. So before we jump into our story, I'll let Miss Chloe give you a little background, and then we'll jump into our story.
So I don't know that I knew the word courtship either, but I had been going to church probably, I guess, since I was 17, and I was 23, 24 at the time when we met. So I heard preaching on how it should be done, and so I probably was familiar with the term. So
More familiar than I was.
Yeah. So I knew, some biblical principles there, and what did you really want me to say?
Well, that's it.
Okay.
I just want to give you your background on it. So she come from a non-church background, but then in 2004 got into church, and she was in a church culture where there was a lot of preaching in it, on it, and I'm very thankful for that. So when she and I met, God had established those ideals in my heart, and a desire to please Him, a desire to live a pure life, and God had established those same things in her heart, and I'm very thankful for that. So we met. We were both 23 the first time you saw me. So I'm going to let you tell the story of the first time we met.
Okay, so...
Well, we didn't meet, but the first time you saw me.
Yes. So I had gone to a youth meeting in Conyers, Georgia, and I had seen you before, right?
I think this was the first time you had seen me at the youth meeting.
Okay. Okay. So I had read a book for young women, and it was called Preparing to be a Helpmeet by Debbie Pearl. And it talked about when you see young preachers, you need to pray for them. I can't remember what all it said about it. I only read that book once, but that part stuck out to me, and I saw him there. He was preaching there at this church, and I thought, I'm going to pray for him. Of course, I'm 23 years old and not married. I thought I was an old maid.
She fell madly in love with me that day.
Well, so I saw him, and I took note, I'm going to pray for this man, and I did want him to notice me. So.
And I didn't.
He didn't.
Tell him about the whole part down in the fellowship hall there.
Okay, so he was eating his food near the dessert table, and I thought, well, I'm going to go get a dessert, obviously, but I thought, okay, I'm going to see if he notices me, and he doesn't look up. He's just eating his food, and so I'm trying to pretend like I can't make up my mind, which probably wasn't completely
couldn't make up your mind.
Yeah, so I hung out there for a while, and he never looked up, so I gave that up and went back to the table to eat my dessert. And before he left, he came by the table and spoke to this man that was sitting beside me and didn't look at me, didn't notice me.
I can't believe it.
So,
but I did. I walked, and I was so just, and I know those of you that know me personally, I was so fast-tracked. I'm wide open. And so I wasn't paying attention to detail. I was just getting the object at hand done and moving on and just done. But God knew what He was doing. He was. So she starts stalking my Facebook.
Not then.
Oh, not then. I'm sorry. So she sees me there and begins to pray for me. And then in July, we were both at Brother Mark Stroud's meeting, and that's a huge meeting. So we didn't necessarily run into each other, but she saw me. And then August, we were at Brother Sammy Allen's camp meeting, and she saw me. And this whole time, I'm just oblivious that she exists. And at the same time, go ahead.
So the following times that I saw him, it just reminded me, you're supposed to be praying for him. And so I never did talk to him, but it just put a reminder, for me, just, I'm supposed to be praying for him. So I would do that.
And God was just preparing things. At that same time, I was becoming friends with a man that was good, close friends with her, and his wife was good, close friends with her. And so Zach and Allison, and I was getting to know Zach, and we were becoming friends. And then I think September and October, there was no meetings where we saw each other. And then I went to the camp meeting in November, and I saw her, and I was like, whoa. The word I typically use is Shazam. All right. So I saw the back of her head. We were in a service together, and I was like, who is this girl? And I told my pastor that day, and I had never done this before. I told my pastor, I said, I'll meet that girl today. And so I sure did. And so we go down to the dining hall for lunch. And I think you said I held the door open.
Mm-hmm.
I held the door open for several women coming through. And I think there was something Allison said to you at that time.
She said, he's single.
And the whole time, I'm trying to see her left hand to see if she's married. And also trying to figure out, like, if she had an age tag on, because she looks very young. And I'm like, okay, this girl.
What's an age tag?
I don't know. I just made that up. I just made it up. So we go, and so I'm sitting at a table like this, and she's sitting at a table behind me. And the whole time I'm looking over my shoulder trying to see if she had a wedding ring on. And I'm just like, who is this girl? And I saw that she was friends with Allison. So I went to Allison's husband, Zach, and it's the same time, and I'll let her tell this part. I go to Allison's husband, Zach, and I tell him, I'm like, hey, who is that young lady with y'all? I'm asking him, who is this? And it's like light bulbs are going off in his mind. And I said, I had to tune my guitar and get ready for the upcoming service. And I was like, could you go and see if she'd come up so we could meet? I mean, and this was like, I had never done anything like this elaborate. I was nervous, but I believed it was the right thing. The Lord had kind of sparked something in my heart. And so we're having that conversation, and she's in the dining hall still. I'll let you tell that part.
So I was talking with several ladies there, and I know who one of them was. I can't remember who the rest of them were.
But definitely Miss Millie.
Miss Millie was there, and she was working in the kitchen. And we were talking, and I'm 24 and single, and that's what everybody wants to talk about is, do you have a guy? Are you, seeing anybody or whatever? And I can't remember even if she asked me that, but we were on the topic of, I guess, being in love. And I said, well, I always wanted to meet my husband here at the camp. And so
Miss Millie had met her husband at the camp.
So we were talking about that, and I said that I'd always wanted to meet my husband there at the camp. And at that same time, Miss Allison came up, and she said, well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. There's somebody that wants to meet you in the auditorium. And then so I got nervous real quick. I thought I was going to be sick, and I was kind of like, that's weird. Who is this person? Like, where am I going? Who wants to meet me? So I thought it was kind of scary at first.
So I'm up on the platform, and I look, and you got to understand, I think this building will seat at least 2,000 people. It's huge. And I look and hear her and Miss Allison come down the aisle. I'm like, she came. I'm like, this is correct. What am I going to say? And so at the same time I'm coming off the platform, our friend, Brother Steve Goolsby, he's like, I don't know if he saw what was going on and just wanted to pester me. I don't know. But it's like he knew something was happening. And at the same time I arrived at that little group, so did Brother Steve. And he just like, he was being funny and telling jokes. And so it was kind of hard for us to talk. So eventually service is about to start. It was starting. And here was my subtle way of making sure she was even old enough for me to talk to. I think I asked you what your name was, I think.
I don't think you
I did? Okay. So I asked her this. I said, so what year did you graduate high school?
Yeah.
That was my subtle way of asking her how old she was. And we graduated the same year. And it's a kind of a cool story. The family that got her into church, the Shepherd family, they are this Brother DJ Shepherd. He was a huge influence in me, in my life, on the other side of the state when I was in high school and doing agriculture and Future Farmers of America, the FFA. And so it's crazy that he was having an influence in both of our lives. But she graduated the same year as I did, so I'm like, okay, so service is starting. And let me break here. we are living in a culture where I see young men that just will not talk to young ladies. And let me point something out. Maybe some of you are listening to just the audio, but if you're watching, it is very obvious that as Brother Toby Powers said, I outpunted my coverage when I married Miss Chloe, or even got her to talk to me. And let me help you, young men. If you'll talk to young ladies, it can overcome a bunch of ugly, okay? And I am proof of that, all right? And this was pre-beard, too, so I wasn't covering as much of it up. But in all seriousness, though, if you'll just step out and just have some boldness, be a man, and just step out and start talking to young ladies, it really does. Showing confidence, showing humor. Don't be a goofball, but showing humor and having confidence, it really does make a difference with young ladies. I think it wins them over. I really do. I think it wins them over. And this is obvious. It works. So service starts. Brother Clint Kearns was up there leading I Never Shall Forget the Day. And
How do you remember that?
I remember every little thing. So I went back to the back of the tabernacle, and I got down between two pews because I was leaving that night, and it was not going to be there after the service, and I knew that I'd heard that she was leaving and was not going to be back the rest of the week. So I was like, man, I may never get to see this girl again. Little did I know she had been watching me. By this time, had you creeped my Facebook?
Not yet.
Okay. She didn't even have a Facebook. She had to log on to somebody else's Facebook to creep it. So I get between these pews and I'm like, Lord, I know clearly that you nudged me to go talk to this girl, get to know her. And I'm like, what do I do? And I was like, I may never see her again. So in the middle of singing, congregational singing, I walk up in front, the pew in front of them. I turn around and I had this, back then it was a spiral top notebook, the little ones like you buy at Walmart or Dollar General. And I opened it, I handed it to her, and I was like, could I have your number? I would love to get to know you better. And she's like, oh. And Miss Allison sitting on the other side of her. I couldn't believe I was doing it. She couldn't believe I was doing this. And I was like, I'm not going to be here tonight, and you're not going to be here the rest of the week. I'd like to get to know you. And Miss Allison, I think, grabbed your arm and said,
it doesn't mean you're going to be marrying him.
It did then, but
we didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't know. So it was so funny. So she wrote down her number, and I still have that pad of paper. It is in my desk drawer at the church. She handed it back and held on to it. And she said, "You better fast and pray before you call this number." But little did we know, I want you to tell that story. So you went to family stuff. Tell that story.
Yeah, so it's the week of Thanksgiving, and I went to visit my family, and I thought, I really want to go back and see this guy.
That's me.
Yeah. And I wasn't expecting to go back. I wasn't planning to go back, but I thought, I think I want to go back. So I think I asked or told, I can't remember, my dad that I was going to go back. I was living by myself at this point, so I wasn't at home anymore.
And we'll get to that because that's a key in our courtship.
I was a public school teacher at the time, so I was just like, I want to go back, and I went to leave, and I had locked my keys in my car. So I go and get my dad, and he's trying to rig something up to get my car door unlocked, and it just so happened.
This is Thanksgiving Day, y'all. Thanksgiving Day in middle of nowhere, Georgia.
That this locksmith rides by and sees what we're doing and pulls in. And I don't even think he charged me.
He did.
I don't think he charged me for it. And he got my car door open, and I hit the road.
Yeah.
Went back to the camp.
So I see her that night, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And so this was a lot freer. This conversation was a lot freer. So that evening, and that was Thursday evening of Thanksgiving of 2011, and then Friday evening, we stayed up. And, of course, obviously there's people cleaning and talking in the fellowship hall. We stayed up till 1 o'clock, after 1 o'clock both nights, and just got to know each other. It was really like an interview. And on a practical side, you need to know where the other person stands, especially if you're wanting to serve Jesus. And let me say this, you may not be planning on going into ministry right now, but you don't know what God's going to have for you in the future. So you need to make sure they're of like practice and faith, and we'll say more about that in a minute. And there was all kind of dynamics to our courtship that I honestly believe the devil, the enemy, did not want us to be together. And there was all kind of dynamics that we had to wade through, and we might talk about that in another setting. But I want to talk more about practical things. And she and I both, we met in November. I guess you could say we went on 2 dates. We went on 2 dates in December. I want to tell them about our first date, at least. I had this elaborate plan, and she was getting pressure from another source.
And I'll add something too. Before we talked, I was just like, the next person, I don't want to just date somebody or court somebody just to do it. Whoever I'm talking to next, I want this to be who I marry. So I was extremely cautious. Like, I don't like this boyfriend, girlfriend breakup, this person.
Drama.
I don't like all of that.
Yeah.
And I just wanted the next person just to be who I was going to marry. And so I was very careful and slow about it because of that I had talked to the Lord about.
And she was getting some counsel that was wrong. And we didn't know it then, but it was some distorted counsel, and it breaks our heart. And we're not going to go into all that today, but there was just this pressure, and we went. So Brother Zach and Miss Allison, they brought her down to Atlanta, to like the Atlanta Centennial Olympic Park area, and she had no idea what all we were doing. So they bring her to Atlanta. I meet them down there. We go to the Cheesecake Factory, which back then I thought the Cheesecake Factory was like, the equivalent to the Ritz-Carlton. Now I still enjoy it, but it's kind of funny to think. I thought that I'd never been to anywhere like this. I'm like, man, this is crazy. And the one we went to, you can we set up on the second story. You could see over the Buckhead and all that. And had to get a valet parking. I had never done anything like that because I'm a hillbilly. But we went, and I mean, it was just like she was so nervous. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So she was so nervous, and we are sitting there, and Brother Zach and Miss Allison are there, obviously, and we then go ice skating, okay? And we'll talk about this more in a minute, but like, we didn't hold hands until we got married. So she cannot ice skate. Would you? Is that a fair? You were struggling a little bit.
I was okay.
I
didn't fall.
She's no Nancy Kerrigan or whatever that lady's name was. She wasn't doing any
triple axels.
Yeah, triple axels or anything. So you can tell what age group we're from. I just said Nancy Kerrigan. There's a Gen Zer like listening to this, type it in on their phone like, who is that? But we went. Tanya Harding was the other one. I was trying to think. Yeah. Tanya Harding. But we went, and then went ice skating at Centennial Olympic Park outside. It was so romantic, but she was just nervous, very nervous. And I'm like, this isn't going to go anywhere. And I'm like, just devastated. I think this was our second time we went off, because you had said at Yankee Candle you wanted that candle. Remember, because we went to Olive Garden.
We went to the mall.
One time. We went to Mall of Georgia.
Yeah. So
this was our second time going off, and and that's why you had gotten a lot of pressure. That's why there was nervousness. She had gotten a lot of pressure, and she was really scared about it. So then we go on this like horse and buggy ride through Atlanta. Like, not when people hear Atlanta, they're thinking like, there's people selling drugs over here and people spray painting. It wasn't like that. It was the nicer part downtown, and it was just so like, I was like, this is it. I'll never see her again. And we had been talking on the phone and stuff like that, but she really had been getting a lot of pressure, and she was struggling. And I had put so much thought into her gift. She had mentioned she wanted a lavender candle at Yankee Candle when we had went off before. So I had gotten that candle, and I had wrote my heart down in the letter and all of this. And so that was my gift to her. I think this was my Christmas gift. And I gave her this present, and I was just like madly in love with her. And I get to my truck because she had given me a present as well. And she had given me a chocolate mint, which is my least favorite chocolate ever, a milk chocolate mint.
I didn't know.
Ghirardelli. You didn't know. He had no way of knowing. And she had to put a card in there. I'm thinking she is about to confess her undying love to me. And I opened the card, and it, had some little hallmark something, and it said Chloe. That was it. And I was like, oh no. So even on the way home, Brother Zach and Sister Allison were like, Chloe, you don't have to do this for us. What was going through your mind? Tell me.
I remember you trying to show out.
I
remember you trying to show out. You did like
not
a flip.
Me.
Yeah.
Never.
You did a flip.
Never.
And
not
you
me.
fell.
That was when I was talking to your dad. That was a different time.
At the
Walmart.
At
Did
the,
I fall at the
yeah.
part? Yeah.
Yeah, you fell.
That makes a lot of sense.
I was like, oh no.
That's me.
So, I don't know. I just remember thinking of that, but I was really nervous. Some of the counsel I was getting wasn't, I guess, geared toward this being a good thing.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of nervous about it, but there was just something there that I was just like, I need to give this guy a shot. And I think the conversations we had at the camp, we were on the same page.
Absolutely.
There were so many things in life that we agreed on, and that how we wanted to live and how we wanted to do things. And that was a big part of it for me, just finding somebody that
Agreed.
was on the same page as I was.
Yeah. And so we that was kind of rocky, but it really picked up after that. And a lot of times you hear courtship. So from our understanding, courtship is you're getting to know someone for the purpose of marriage. Dating is just kind of, it's very frivolous. Flippant. Yeah, flippant. You just kind of, it's just a social thing. It's not, it doesn't have to be serious, but courtship is more serious. And I think we have I know in my life, but other people's lives, I think we have an epidemic of people just giving little parts of their heart away to different people. And really it causes, if you're just flippantly dating around, it really hurts when it comes time to get married. It really causes undue stress on you when you go to get married. So we January, I think we officially, I guess, started calling it courting. We made it official, and then February we got engaged. That's a whole nother story. I went really big on the engagement, and I kind of, she'll say this all the time. I think it will. I'll say, thank you for marrying me. And she'll say,
thank you for talking me into it.
Thank you for talking me into it. So she's mine now. She is mine now. But no, in all seriousness, we were mid-20s. We both had our own houses. We were not under our parents' roof. I was already in full-time evangelism. As she said, she was teaching full-time public school, special ed, elementary. I'm trying to, so when we started, and this is going to get to the more practical, we started setting boundaries right off the bat. It was so funny. She asked me, we talked about how many kids we wanted in those initial conversations and interview. I think we both said 6. Is that right? We had both said 6. And then she asked me, like, where I saw myself in 5 years. I said, married to you. It was kind of funny. It was so funny. But, and I'm telling you, be bold. If you can't be good looking, be just bold, man. So I wrote a couple things here. In today's culture, an expectation of young couples. She and I could have easily just dated. Our parents wouldn't have had any problem with that. We could have had very little boundaries, and most folks would have never said anything. But we wanted to base it off of what God thought, not off of what others thought. So this is for people. Listen, we're not trying to put anything on you. Now I will say the Bible, what the Bible says. I'm about to read that, and it's what we based our courtship off of. But you may not agree with every little thing that we talk about, but you got to understand, she and I are both made of flesh, and I don't trust my flesh. She doesn't trust her flesh, and we definitely did not want to trust our unmarried flesh together. So we wanted to have a testimony. We wanted to honor the Word of God, and this is what we based our courtship really off of one verse, and that's 1 Corinthians 7:1. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. And if you look at the context, it's talking about fornication, to avoid fornication. So now I'm not saying we never shook hands. Shake my hand. She was trying to hold my hand because we're married. I'm not saying we never shook hands, but that was the extent of it. I remember sometimes we would sit down on a couch and I would accidentally like bump her leg, and it was like electricity, went through me, because there are boundaries God has put inside of us and our conscience that we don't want to break down. Because if you start holding hands, that's a boundary, and then you start cuddling, that's a boundary, then you start kissing, that's a boundary, and those boundaries keep getting broken down. Eventually you're going to be in a mess. So we base these things. It may seem strange that this was our verse, but again, I know my flesh, I know her flesh, and we decided to place these boundaries. Now listen to this. This is number one. We never went anywhere alone. Sometimes this meant driving in separate cars to meetings to protect the principle, which was good for a man not to touch a woman. We were often picked on for this by older preachers, but it was worth it. Many times we would travel with a teenage preacher boy in the back seat. So literally, we had some men that we really looked up to that thought, y'all, you're just taking this too far. But now I've lived a little, and I'm looking back over time, and I don't feel like we went too far. And I feel like maybe some of those that were making fun of us, they didn't go far enough as time has played out. Number two, we never held hands, and I mentioned that earlier, but we take the above verse literally, and we both knew that there are natural boundaries that God has placed in us that we didn't want to tear down. And I mentioned that earlier. Holding hands leads to cuddling, cuddling leads to kissing, and kissing, leads to other things. This is my point. We can't take fire in our bosom and not get burned, as the Word of God says. And then we guarded our speech. And this is very important. And now I think this could go into texting as well. We guarded our speech and our texting. I believe that in courtship, you need to get to know one another, but some things are not meant to be known until after the I do. We would go eat with friends, sit at separate tables from our friends that were chaperoning us, and get to know each other, but we tried to always be careful about our topics. And let me say this. We are not saying that you need to have two people sitting beside you like right at all times. And it was such a blessing. Brother Zach and Miss Allison, they had been married for years. By the time we were recording, they had their house there in Athens, and we would drive. It would take me about 2 to 3 hours typically to get there, and then she would drive about an hour and a half, and I would stay the night there, but she would go back home. And they had a living room with a fireplace. It was the wintertime. We got to sit around the fire, and they would be in their kitchen, and there was like an archway in between. So it wasn't that they were always sitting there in the archway looking at us. That would have been real awkward. And this part may be even a little bit more for parents or for chaperones themselves. Give the people some breathing room. That you're there for accountability, not to sit there and listen to everything they got to say. And so we had that good buffer. Didn't you feel that way? I don't feel like there's anything that we needed to know about each other that we couldn't talk about before we got married.
Yeah, we got to know each other. I think it's important.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's so important. So we guarded our speech. We never held hands, and we never went anywhere alone. And those were the three things. Everything else that we did or did not do was based off of this. Let me say this. None of these things make us better than anyone else. It actually proves we're like everyone else. We all struggle with the flesh. My past isn't pleasant, and I wanted to guard what Sister Chloé and I had. I can say that we were both thankful for our courtship, and I know I am, and I believe Chloé is, that we were very thankful that we did it the way we did it. And was it inconvenient? Sometimes. There were times we would drive in separate vehicles because we couldn't find a chaperone to go to church together. And you say, well, that's just excessive. And I know there's somebody here, because I've heard it said, I've had books written to me by parents saying, well, I trust my young person. Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You shouldn't trust your flesh, anybody else's flesh. Don't trust the flesh. Don't allow preparedness to meet opportunity. And both of us being in our 20s, naturally, we're attracted to each other. There's hormones. We did not need to put ourselves. There's temptation there that could just snowball if we ever allowed ourselves to be put in that situation. And now, all these years later, I think it'll be 13 years next June, and it will be 13 years next June. God's given us a platform to try to help people and to try to lead people to Christ and promote holiness. What if that part of our life, where we were already in the public sphere, or we were being used of God and we were both seeking God, what if we had decided to just cut the corner right there? We wouldn't really have a leg to stand on. And again, I've not done everything perfect. I'm not claiming that I've done everything perfect in my past. Neither is she. But by the time we met, there were some things established, and I'm thankful for it. Again, parents, your children need boundaries. Young people, make the decision to guard yourself and implement your own boundaries, even if your parents or your pastor does not. It is worth it. And so, do you have anything you want to add to the courtship discussion before I go on?
I just felt respected. Of course, it was a mutual decision. When we talked that first night at the camp, and the second night, it was 2 nights, we really just, it was an interview, but it was a fun interview.
We had a lot of fun.
It was, I was not going to sit here and waste my time if he didn't want to serve God. If he didn't want me, I wanted to be a keeper at home. If he didn't want me to do that, if he didn't want children, there was no time for me to waste sitting here. So we really got a lot of stuff out on the table right away. And so just knowing that we agreed, I felt more comfortable going forward with the relationship. And just how he treated me, he respected me, and he didn't ask things of me that were inappropriate. And he just honored me and respected me, and that made me love him more.
I love her. I don't know if y'all can tell. She's been holding my hand under the table this whole time. I love her. I'll say this, young ladies, and you have to say this both ways now. Young men, if a young lady won't keep her hands off of you, or a young lady, if a young man will not keep his hands off of you, that's not love, that's lust. And love is worth waiting and doing things right for, respect and love. And man, there's so much we could talk about there, but these are just principles we use. So I compiled these 5 things. So I wrote it out. Young people, when you're seeking God's will about a mate, ask them these 5 things. And this rolls into courtship before. And let me say this: I think these are questions you need to ask before you begin to court. Again, courtship is for the purpose of marriage. Who am I going to marry? Is this the right person? So you don't want to give your heart to somebody that deeply, okay? I mean, I couldn't imagine us, been May of 2012, having broke everything off. Like, what if there would have been an unknown thing and we hid those things from each other? That would have been tough. That would have been devastating. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for and a lot of times people marry within their churches, and because we're so flippant with our dating, there are a lot of church families and friendships and relationships that have been destroyed because of all this boyfriend-girlfriend stuff in churches. And I would even recommend waiting until you're 18 to get serious, to get official, because it can cause a lot of trouble. And I think waiting till you're both adults is a good idea. So here's some questions that I think is a good thing to ask people when you're considering somebody, and a lot of this came up in our conversation during those 2 nights at the camp, and some of this is more that you see it in them than you necessarily ask them verbally. Also, I'll say this: don't expect these things out. Now, nobody's perfect. We're not asking for perfection. We're asking for direction. But know that if you're going to ask these of other people, you need to be doing these things yourself. So, number one, are you saved? And I want you to make them give you specifics. Don't just allow them a vague answer. I teach a class. We teach a class in the School of Evangelism called Getting Past the Yes. So we always say never take no for an answer, but I say never take yes for an answer when it comes to salvation. Make them tell you why they're saved. And if they're not truly biblically saved, if their salvation does not line up to this book, you need to run. I don't care how cute they are, how pretty they are, how buff they are. I say run from them, okay? Number 2, are they Spirit-filled? And again, this is something, there are fruits of the Spirit-filled life. Ephesians 5 talks about being controlled by the Spirit, speaking to yourselves in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making a melody in your heart unto the Lord, submitting yourselves one to another as unto the Lord. Obviously, there's the husband and wife dynamic, but if you go further in the text, there is the children parent dynamic. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And then it says, honor thy mother and thy father. For this is the first commandment with promise, and so shall it be. Thy days be long upon the earth. And then there's the servant master, and even the master servant. Maybe they're in a position of leadership somewhere, how they treat other people, how they submit to other Christians, how they submit to their pastor, how they submit to their parents, how they honor other people. These are all fruits of being filled with the Spirit. And obviously, you could go into walking in the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. Against such there is no law. So you want to look and see, does their life exemplify the Spirit-filled life and the kind of music they listen to? Okay, if they're listening to trash music, according to the Scriptures, they can be saved, but they cannot be Spirit-filled if they're not putting the right. That's Ephesians 5:19. Again, speaking to yourselves in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody your heart unto the Lord. Those are not prerequisites. Those are fruits of it. Okay, so saved, Spirit-filled. Are they sound in doctrine? And this was the bulk of our conversation those nights. Do they believe the same doctrine? Do they use the same Bible? Do they go to the same type church? And I said this in my notes here. After all, they will be the person helping raise your children. I've heard people say this in joking matter, said, my wife's a Catholic and I'm a Baptist and my kids are Catholics. Well, it'll never work. It will never work. Your children, any move towards either one of those denominations, it's going to confuse them if there's still a connection to the other. It's setting yourself up for failure if you don't marry after your kind. And that, I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about what you are. Okay, a lot of the people listening to this or watching this, man, you've got good, solid foundation in churches and pastors. And my goodness, don't go and step outside of those that kind to marry and hoping you can pull somebody else up, because you're most of the time, if you're going after, you say, I know people are going to drop in the comments, well, my grandparents and my parents and this, that. For every one you give me, I'll give you 100 that did not work. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, we've seen it in our friend circles. People that go off and marry outside of what we are. And listen, if you're a Methodist, go marry. Don't marry somebody that's going to conflict with your beliefs. You're going to have to drag along. I think you've always said it. You did not want to marry somebody that was sitting on, what did you say? How did you say it?
Just when I was watching you, I knew I wanted a strong leader, somebody that believed like I did, somebody that would lead our family, raise our children in the way that I believed, which, try to do everything based off the Bible. And so I watched him those few times just to see, was he the same person at this meeting as he was at this other one? how does he treat his mom? How does he treat older people? How does he treat children? I was just watching him, and it was November or December, I think it was December when I got on my mom's Facebook and creeped you. We never did go back to that, but I got on my mom's at Christmas time is what it was.
Yeah.
But it was just, I don't know, something else that I wanted to say was when we married, I knew who I was getting. It was not a surprise. It was not a shock. We literally talked about everything that was important, and I knew who I was getting. You didn't lie or hide anything. And I guess I get confused when people have been married a year, divorce, and
yeah.
I'm like, somebody was lying or somebody wasn't talking or something, because...
And a lot of times parents will not allow communication enough, and the young people will rush to get... Now, look, we had a 6-month... We were officially courting/engaged for a total of 6 months. We met each other in November. We talked through December, courting by January, engaged by February, married by June. And like she said, we knew each other. But a lot of times, because of overpressure in this area, and this is a whole nother side of this, because of overpressure in this area of courtship, a lot of young people will rush to get married because they cannot get to know each other, and then they end up marrying the wrong person. So there's a balance in this, and again, parents, give them, I'm not saying don't chaperone them. I'm not saying don't go and let them run off free, and do whatever they want to. But at the same time, give them that buffer where they really can get to know each other. All right. They're not gonna get expecting right there in the living room. If you give them the distance between the living room and the kitchen. All right. You got to watch them, but there's got to be trust there, because I know personally people that are in relationships that they're miserable in because they did not get to know their spouse, because there wasn't that time like we're talking about to get to know each other. So, are they saved? Are they spirit-filled? Are they sound? Are they separated? And again, I wrote this here. This may be more of an observation than a question. Look at their life. Are they separated to God? So that would be their walk. That would be, do they read their Bible? Do they pray? Do they love the Lord? Are they faithful to church? These are the things that she's talking about. She didn't want somebody that sat on the back row, wore blue jeans to church all the time, and she had to drag to church. And if you wore blue jeans to church, I'm not mad at you, but she wanted somebody that was more serious. Is that fair? You wanted somebody that was more serious about the things of God. So are they separated to God and away from the world? If they, and I put this in quotation marks, clean up for you, it will never last. If I would have had to convince her, I think you need to dress a certain way, or I think you need to not work, and she's bucking that, not that we could not have worked through some things in courtship and grown together, but if I'm trying to make her do that in order to marry me or to even get in a relationship with me, then she's going to develop rebellion, okay? Or she's going to develop Phariseeism, or she's going to become a rebellious Pharisee. And so you got to allow God to work on the hearts of that other individual in this matter of separation. Don't think you can whip somebody into shape, because you will. If they clean up for you, it will never ever last. And that's something that and this is more of a marriage topic, but we can talk about it here. But we do what we do, and we abstain from what we abstain from, not because of the brethren, not because we've got a list in our bedroom that I'm bashing her over the head about every day. We do it because we love Christ, and we try to base what we do or do not do off of this book. And separation, a lot of times it becomes conforming to somebody else, and you get burdened down. It becomes more of a burden than a blessing. Separation's not a burden to us. We're on vacation right now. We're shooting this on vacation. This is not our house. I'm looking outside, and there is a porch with like a 15-foot drop off, and there is a barrier. There is a boundary around that whole porch, and I'm really happy that it's there because I've got 2 children. One's 9, one's 7, and we don't want our children to run off and fall and break their neck or end up in the lake down there. We are glad there's a boundary there, and that's the same in the Christian life. The reason there's boundaries in this Bible, and the reason even maybe your parents or your pastor sets boundaries that maybe you don't always understand, the reason they're there is to keep you from falling off the ledge. And so those are things that were important to us, and we wanted to establish those. And I saw those in her life. Obviously, she creeped my Facebook. She saw those in my life, hopefully. And again, not perfection. I hope I've grown over the past 12 and a half, almost 12 and a half years. I believe she's grown over the last 12 and a half years. And we are growing together in the grace of life. But there needs to be some pretty clear things over the elementary foundational stuff and separation before you jump into that relationship. And then lastly, are they saved? Are they spirit-filled? Are they sound? Are they separated? But are they submitted? Are they submitted? And are they willing to go and do whatever the Lord's will is in your life? Because once we got married, it was no longer my life or her life. They too became one flesh. It became our life. And you read about great missionaries of the past, and man, their wives were not on board with what they did, and man, it was devastating. It was devastating, and I really wanted a spouse, and I believe she could say the same. That I wanted to have somebody that was submitted to the will of God. That wherever we went, and see, she kind of knew. I think that was kind of, you could say that I had not been out of the country but one other time before we got married. But I think you kind of knew, like, it's not going to be the same anymore. So her hometown, there's more cows than people, right?
I don't know if it's literally true, but it's a saying.
How far was it to work from your house?
It was like 3 blocks away.
3 blocks. How far was it to your church?
5 miles.
How far was it to Ingalls?
It's been so long.
Maybe a mile?
Oh, Ingalls. Yeah, like 4 miles.
4 miles. So,
yeah,
like her whole life was within a 5-mile circle. In the first year we were married, we drove 50,000 miles, and we were only home at our house 38 nights. Okay? That is a huge deal. And so, especially young men, you need to pay attention to this. Not that you need to belittle a young lady or look down upon her, but you need to make sure that she's going to let go of mommy and daddy's apron strings, and she's going to go and serve God with you. And you're marrying a family too. I hate to be that way, but if that family, you need to observe that family. And if they are dogmatic and you're literally going to have to drag that spouse away from them to go do something for God, be real careful. Take all of it. You think that's fair?
I haven't really thought much about that. I don't want to say.
Just be careful. Make sure there's submission there, and that you're going to be able to serve God with this person.
Talking about the so we had discussed everything. I knew you were in evangelism. I knew you were doing all of that, and I was ready to go, and nothing was a secret. Everything was out in the open. But the comment I made earlier about people getting divorced after a year, I mean, I probably shouldn't say stuff like that. It was confusing to me. I would see that happen sometimes, but that was a huge difference. Like, I was ready to go and I was willing to do that, but that was hard for me at first.
It was.
I came to enjoy it later, but the first year was really hard. I remember crying one morning because you asked where I wanted to go get a biscuit. And I'm like, I just want to make you a biscuit. I don't want to go anywhere. So that, obviously, you can't predict everything that's going to happen, but that's, I guess, why we have vows, and you stay true to them, and you try to follow God as you follow your husband.
And that's even more into the marital advice. Men, you have to keep your finger on the pulse of your home and your marriage. And the wife, I believe, is the heart of the home. She brings that joy and that compassion and that love into the home. And you have to keep your finger on the heartbeat, on that pulse, because you lose your wife. First of all, you lose your wife. Okay, a lot of people say you lose your wife, you lose your ministry. That's the most ridiculous thing you could say. Do I love the ministry? Absolutely. Do I thank God for the ministry? Absolutely. And the ministry, it is a major part of our life. But at the end of the day, if you lose your wife, you lose your wife. Okay? And what I mean by that is she's the most precious thing God's ever given me outside of my salvation. And ministry or not, I want to be married to her. I want to spend the rest of my life with her. So I think it's very lopsided when we say, you lose your wife, you lose your ministry. No, you do lose your ministry, but first and foremost, you lose your wife. You lose that family unit. And I don't want to run so ragged. And I run all the time. We're on vacation right now. And she was so gracious to sit down at a microphone with me because people had been asking for this. And this is a good time for us because we're kind of got more laid back time. But I want to keep my finger on the pulse of this. And sometimes she'll say, look, man, I'm tired. And there's times I let her rest instead of making her, especially when we were in evangelism. I said, y'all go with me Sunday and Wednesday, but y'all are nobody's puppet. Y'all are not going to get up on the stage and dance around for people. If y'all don't want to go the rest of the time, y'all don't have to. Is that right? And so I want to give them a break. There's times I'll leave them behind and let them rest because I need them. I need them in my life, and I don't want to wear them out. And I wear myself out, but I don't want to wear them out. But these 5 things, be very careful. Ask them, observe them, and see if they're missing any of these things, or if you're missing them in your life. Don't seek. You don't have to pray about anything. See, we're always looking for the specific will of God, but God's given us so much general will in His Word, and we oftentimes are seeking this great revelation of the specific will of God when we will not look at what He's already laid out in black and white, and that's the point of this. Wait on the one God has for you. Again, you're not looking for perfection; you're looking for direction. So, you got anything else, sweetheart?
I just remember when, I guess, well, we were already engaged, but like he mentioned earlier, I was so nervous. I was so afraid to make the wrong choice that I was scared to make any choice. But our pastor, Brother Gravely, gave me some good advice, and because we had a courtship experience the way that we did, I feel that I was able to use my head more in making decisions, and I wasn't so wrapped up in the emotional side of things. But Brother Gravely said, if you've sought the Lord and you've prayed, and I'm trying to think of the exact way he said it. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said, if you've sought the Lord and you've prayed, you can say, Lord, this is the door that I'm going to walk through unless you stop me, because I think it's what you want me to do. And so because of all the nerves I had, I was so nervous. That was kind of what I had to do. I was like, here's this man, and he, we have all these things in common. We have a fun time together. We enjoy talking to each other. We seem like we have the same goals in life, and I know that we could easily raise children together, and all of these practical things. But I'm a practical person. That just helped me. It just helped me to go forward. There is an attraction there, and so all of that just really wrapped up. And I just said, well, Lord, this is the door I'm going to go through unless you stop me.
I think He gave you that talk when you almost broke up with me at Josh and Melissa's wedding. Is that right?
It was at their house.
Oh, at their house.
It was at their house, but it may have been after
As a result of the wedding. I think that was, 2 weeks before we got married?
Yeah, I got really nervous.
She got really nervous. Yeah. And on that note, aren't y'all glad she married me? It's such a blessing. On that note, we have body, soul, and spirit, okay? And if you're a young person watching or listening, you need to hear this. There is a physical attraction, the body. And there are going to be people that you may be attracted to that I'm not attracted to, and vice versa. But there has to be a physical attraction, okay? That is that, and society and culture makes that the main thing. But and I'm not saying it's the main thing, but it is a part of how God created us. Then, so there's the body, there's the soul. That's our seat of understanding. That is our personality. That's who we are. Okay, I married Chloe because of the personality and things that her nature, her joy, she's very reserved on things, and I'm very thankful for that. But that I didn't get to know her spirit, and I'll get to that in a minute. I got to know her soul. I got to know who she is. I guess that's where the name or the phrase soulmate. She's my soulmate. I guess that's where it came from. And then there's the spirit, and that's the spiritual side. So you need to line, and we've talked a lot about the spiritual, but there needs to be a physical attraction. There needs to be chemistry. That's a word for it. There needs to be that connection. Your soul connects with one another. And then there needs to be that spiritual connection, and that'll help you. And Brother Gravely was what he said. He said if all these other things line up and there's no red flags, walk through that door.
That's right, the red flags.
Yeah. And so there was a particular young lady I talked to years and years ago, and there was two of those, but there was one that was just missing, and I could not walk through that door. And I know we still know her today. I'm not mad at her. I don't think less of her. I think she's a godly godly lady, but it just was not right. So God will give you direction in that. So, but I've enjoyed this. You got anything else?
I had no red flags.
Praise God.
One thing, there were no red flags. So
praise God. I can't speak for her, but I am deeply in love with this lady right here. And we're enjoying the grace of life together. And again, we're not perfect. We don't claim to be perfect. And I've made plenty of mistakes, but I really do. I love her, and I want you to enjoy the grace of life that we're getting to enjoy and that the Bible talks about. So we've enjoyed making this podcast for you. Have you enjoyed it?
I don't like this.
I know she does not love being behind the camera or the microphone, but I want you to ask questions that will keep her behind the microphone, okay? We did this episode because people asked for specifics. We about courtship. So if you have any other suggestions or questions that we could cover, maybe it's not something that she would be a part of, but if we could answer any questions or maybe a topic that you would like to hear talked about, you could drop them in the comment or email them to us at the hewettfamilyblog@gmail.com. So reach out to us. Thank you again for watching and listening. Please share this, like, subscribe, do all those things so we can help more people. We don't know everything. We don't have all the answers, but we have a book that has all the answers.
Amen.
And we want the world to know the joys of the Christian life, of Christian marriage, of a Christian home. And we'd love for you to help us with that, getting the word out. God bless you. Until next time.